Alright YouTube, so we are back of course to talk about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, sort of, but also potentially Final Fantasy XVI. In our last upload we talked about the possibility of Remake being at Tokyo Game Show. More specifically we talked about Part 2 potentially being there, but really Remake could be there in really any sort of capacity. Now it's on me as the content creator for not going more in depth on that video, but a lot of people took it as me thinking or saying that we're going to get like a full-blown trailer for the game with gameplay and everything, and I guess a release date or some shit, I don't know. But I never said that, I definitely didn't mean that. The point is that the game's been in development in some form or another for more than a year at this point, and it's been in full development since around the release, I think, or so, of Remake Part 1. Now, they've stated in the past that they're at less than 100% efficiency simply because of COVID and working remotely, working from home and stuff, but still, they've been working on the game for a while, and they could simply just talk about it. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to show us something for the game, but they could simply talk about Part 2 or the Remake project as a whole. One thing that we've been waiting for a long time is how many games are there going to be? That's something they've talked about in the past. I think Nomura talked about it, how once they get closer to wanting to talk about the game, they can kind of give us an idea of what their overall plans are. But let's say they did want to show something for Part 2. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full-blown trailer. It could just be, concept art. It could be character art. It could be renders of locations around the map of what they're working on, like Calm and shit. And it also doesn't have to be a full-blown trailer with like story and gameplay and shit. It could just be a cinematic trailer, similar to the original reveal of Final Fantasy VII Remake. That was a full-on cinematic trailer, had nothing else in it. And also, if they wanted to have Remake at any sort of gaming event, it could be talking about the game comes to other platforms. We know there's a 1-year exclusivity deal for PS4, and we're already coming up on the halfway point of that. So when it comes to like Tokyo Game Show, for example, or maybe even this PS5 event that's coming up that we're going to talk about in this video, they could talk about the game coming to other things. So I want to try to address that as quick as I could, kind of further elaborate on what we talked about in the last video, but it also pertains to what we're going to talk about today, which is it seems like there's something potentially Final Fantasy related going to be revealed at this PS5 event coming up in a couple of days. So what we have for today's video is that Shinji Hashimoto retweeted something in regards to the PS5 event that's upcoming on the 16th, and he showed like a lot of excitement for it. So really quickly, for those that don't know, Shinji Hashimoto is pretty important when it comes to Square Enix and Final Fantasy. For one, he's the Final Fantasy brand manager, but he's also like an executive officer at Square Enix. But he's also like an executive producer on Remake, and he's worked on a lot of other Final Fantasy games, and like Kingdom Hearts and all kinds of other shit. And when it comes to Hashimoto showing enthusiasm for events, it usually means something, and what's important about this particular tweet is that he actually took it down, like minutes later. And the obvious thing here is, why would you delete it if it wasn't a problem? Like, if he didn't like do something he wasn't supposed to, there'd be no reason to delete the damn thing. Now, I don't know the entire track record of Hashimoto showing an interest in an event and it paying off and having a big reveal, but an example I can give when it comes to this channel and stuff that we've talked about is early last year he was retweeting stuff in regards to the state of play that was taking place back then. And a lot of people took this as the possibility of Remake being there. We talked about that. We did videos about that. And a lot of people took that as, like, whatever. Like, people were brushing that off. Nah, we're not going to see Remake at State of Play. Obviously, that actually did happen. And it's the only reason I give stuff like this any sort of attention, especially when it comes to Hashimoto, is because in the past it's actually mattered. So for him to tweet and show excitement for this upcoming PS5 event and then turn right around minutes later and delete the tweet, it's got to mean something, but I just don't know exactly what. The speculation right now is probably Final Fantasy XVI. It's been long overdue, and at this point it does seem like it'd probably be a PS5 game. And something else that adds to that potential Final Fantasy XVI reveal, it's something we did pretty much an entire video about, was that Final Fantasy XVI Twitter account that was created last month, but it more specifically had a Square Enix email address attached to it. And with Hashimoto being heavily attached to the Final Fantasy brand as a whole, it definitely seems like there might be something pretty soon when it comes to Final Fantasy XVI. Now, the other speculation here in regards to the Final Fantasy series is, of course, a Remake, but I don't know why a Remake would be there at a PS5 event, outside of maybe like a port of the first game to PS5. I've seen a lot of people just in my comments alone that talk about Part 2 being like a PS5 game, and I don't know where that comes from because that's never been said or confirmed or anything. I think it's pure speculation, simply because Part 2 is not going to come out for at least another couple of years or so, so it'll be a couple of years into PS5 being released. And a lot of people, I guess, think that that means it's going to be a PS5 game, but again, there's never been confirmation of that. This is something I've talked about before in the past. I did a whole dedicated video for this as well, but when it comes to a new generation of consoles coming out, the older gen is still supported for usually several years. Especially when it comes to Square Enix. As recent as 2017, they released a Dragon Quest game on the PlayStation 3. That was just 3 years ago. And at that point, the PS4 had been out for a couple years, like 3 or 4 years or something. So to assume that because the PS5 is coming out, that they're going to abandon the PS4 platform entirely is just kind of ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. They certainly could go the route of putting Part 2 and the subsequent sequels onto the PS5 exclusively, But they've already broken up the FF7 story into multiple games, right? You already got to pay $60 however many times to get the full FF7 story. But then if somebody has to also invest in another console as well, I don't know, man. I just don't see them going that route, at least with Part 2 anyway. And when it comes to Part 3, assuming there will be a Part 3, and however many years that might be, I could see that one being a PS5 exclusive, because that's probably like 4 or 5 plus years away from us at this point. Now, something I've always said is, at the end of the day, they are a business and they're trying to make money. And what makes the most sense is dropping all the Final Fantasy VII Remake games on this gen of consoles, PS4, Xbox One, and then re-releasing them on the next gen consoles, upgraded graphics, right? They sell the game twice. Makes the most money. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily what I want. I'm not somebody who buys consoles super often. I don't want to have to invest in another console just for one specific game. But at the end of the day, the sequels coming out on PS5 exclusively just means better graphics, better worlds, better gameplay, bigger worlds, all that shit. But to kind of wrap up the video, at the end of the day, it's just Hashimoto retweeting something in regards to the PS5 event. He could just be generally excited for it, but history has shown that it usually means something. We'll have to see if it does. And also, him deleting the tweet has to mean something. So I want to pass it off to you guys. What are your thoughts on this upcoming PS5 event? And do you think we're going to see something Final Fantasy related? Also, keep in mind that people doubted the state of play reveal for Remake back last year, and it did happen. Either way, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys aren't new. What's up, more Final Fantasy VII Remake 16 content. I don't know. Turn on my notifications. Follow me on Twitter, dashingdavid. And my Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like low gain or leave it like Oprah.